Jimmy's on already. Hey,
Hey.
it's dark there.
Oh,
I think
oh
we,
boy, this is a close-up.
yeah, right. It's kind of hard when you got the two on the live.
How you doing, buddy? Thank you for having me.
Oh no, thanks for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're driving back, so oh, look at us and Vix. All these great people are here. They're all coming in to say hi. Tony, you know Tony Pep too.
Oh yeah.
Um,
What's up, guys? Hey, I'm looking
all
at
sorts of great people.
everybody. I
I was
recognize a lot of these names. Hey, guys.
I I was talking last week to Handy Dandy Brandy, and she said she met you out in California. And she said, Patrick just told me to take my shirt off, so I'm a little worried right now.
Oh
Um,
no.
um, Brandy told me that when she met you in California for the first time, she walked up to you and a friend of hers had said, "Tell Jimmy hi from me." So she walked up to you and said the person's name and said that they said hello. And you're like, "Do I know them?" And it wound up that somebody you had never met just wanted her to say hi.
Oh, that's cool.
Uh,
I
so
got. I saw Handy Dandy Brandy also in Workbench Con. We got to hang out a little bit there for the first time. That I spent some time with her.
she's great. I really enjoyed talking with her
She's really
last.
blowing up. You know, it's funny. What's really cool is to see someone like her who started out and then took a big chance and got a big shop and is making it work. I know she talks a little bit nervously, and I know I've been there about taking a big swing financially and that type of thing and being worried about it. It seems like it's working out for her, which is great.
You know what? One of the things I've really noticed, and actually this is perfect for the first thing I want to talk about.
Yep.
Um, Actually, before I get into this, I have to say this. I'm legally obligated. My sister wanted me to say hi to you. She loves you.
Oh,
Um,
it's hi to your sister.
so I'm legally obligated to do that. I think that's a thing.
Court
Um,
ordered.
so one of the themes I have really noticed with talking to people is
Hmm.
that there's a chance opportunity that people are like, this just popped up. I really felt I needed to hop on this. You know, I talked to Pat and Carlina from Pine Bear and Pallet Works,
Sure.
Handy Dandy, like all these people. And I wanted to talk first, since the reason I want to talk to you is Maker Camp,
Sure.
one of the many, many reasons. And Maker Camp is in a couple of weeks. I thought it was 3 weeks. It turns out it's not quite. Um, how did this get started?
Maker Camp. How did Maker Camp get started?
Yeah, yeah.
Maker Camp got started because uh, it was a summer day. I'll tell you how it goes back to me meeting Austin. That's really where it started. There was a hot summer day. I told this story in the podcast recently. There was a hot summer day. I think it was might have been the summer of 2019, maybe the summer of 2018, because it might have taken a year to get going. Yeah, it might have been. I was pulling out of my workshop driveway, which is currently across the street from the racetrack that I own. But at the time, I didn't own the racetrack. Austin and his family did. And there was a car accident that occurred right in front of me while I was about to pull out. Broke a telephone pole, blocked the whole road. So the road was blocked now for what seemed like a couple of hours because the telephone pole exploded right in front of the racetrack. And nobody got hurt. It looked very scary, and there was a fire and everything, but nobody was hurt, and everybody was attending to the woman who crashed. And we were all stuck. So for the first time ever, I walked across the street into the racetrack to buy a soda because we were on our way to go to the diner, and it was like 100 degrees out. And I walked in, and Austin was behind the counter preparing and trying to figure out what to do with his ice cream that was melting because now the electric was shut off. Everything in the area was shut off because the telephone pole broke from the car accident. And I walked in, and Austin said, what are you doing here? I said, do you know me? He says, yeah, I watch your YouTube videos. I said, I live up the block. I go, that's my workshop across the street. It was like the summer, maybe the summer after I got the workshop, but we had never crossed the street. He worked all day long. He worked at the racetrack, and the racetrack was very time consuming. And I knew that it was 11 o'clock every night because the lights at the racetrack would shut off. And when
Sure.
the lights at the racetrack shut off, I was like, damn, it's 11 o'clock already. I'd look at my watch and be like, it's time for me to get ready to go home. And so that day, Austin and I made friends. And I said, come across the street, come hang out. And he started hanging out with me and Brett, who was with me at the time. And somewhere along that year, he goes, I've had an idea for a really long time. His family does themed weekends at their Blackthorn Resort. Most popular is the Catskill Mountain Thunder. It's the biggest motorcycle rally in New York State. And Austin said, I want to do like a Catskill Mountain Thunder, but for makers and blacksmiths. And he started it together, and I had a meeting with his family. I said, I'll be more than happy to introduce Austin to everybody that I can think of, everybody he can think of. So at the very beginning, I was the intermediary between him and a lot of the vendors and a lot of the popular YouTubers that came. And everybody banded together and jumped on the chance to get together and hang out in the Catskills that year one, which was October 19. And it's now we're going, this one is going to be the number 6.
Wow. So that's interesting. I didn't say, I thought that you had like yeah, right. David Woods. I really thought that there was more that you had done, like you went to him with the idea. But
No,
I
no.
mean,
Everybody thinks it's my thing. I
yeah,
would like to say it is, but it's all Austin. He thought of it. And when he saw me, he's like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to use Jimmy's network to get
yeah.
people here. And I said, let's do it. I'd love to have the coolest party of the year in my backyard. So that's how we did it.
Well, and there's Evan too. Well, I mean that makes sense because I mean, as I said, you're sort of the godfather of the maker movement. I when I think
Well,
about
thank you.
makers and people who can do everything, like you're the name that comes up.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I try and keep myself busy.
Well, okay. So I have like a whole list of things that I want to talk about, but I got to take an aside here because
Yes.
this is something I'm really curious about. And coming back to this, you famously, here's another great story I heard. Right?
Yeah.
I think Pat told me this. He said that he was at your place. You guys were doing pizzas. You'd got all the pizza ovens up, and you needed a new pizza peel. And you went over to the shop, cut out a piece of metal,
Yeah.
welded it together, and came back in 20 minutes.
Yeah, something like that happened. Yeah, we needed a big pizza peel because the pizza peel we had was too small, and they were making bigger pizzas, and we wanted to try and keep it from drooping.
That
If you've ever had to make a pizza and get it off of the peel, it's the biggest pain in the butt. You
oh,
need,
it is.
yeah, you need to. The stars have to line up right, unless you're a professional.
Oh my God! And it all yeah, it groups up, and then you got like a
Yeah,
calzone.
exactly, exactly.
So is there anything that you ever went to make and you said, you know what, this is going to take me a while to master, and you had to go through a bunch of steps, and like you really had a hard time mastering it because again,
Yeah,
it seems like you're
blacksmithing.
really strong.
I mean, I really do dig deep into the things that I learn, and the more things you learn, the more quickly you could adapt to new things. So when it comes to blacksmithing, I was took some time. I'm always a student of blacksmithing forever. But I learned a lot by watching. I learned a lot by doing. I learned a lot by reapplying what I know about certain properties of metal and material. And same thing when it comes to working with clay. It's a very difficult medium. People almost make it a joke when it comes to clay. Like, oh, you do pottery. Pottery is extremely complex, and there's so much nuance to the finishes. There's so much nuance to the glazing and to the structure of the clay and how to master it. And that to me is really a bull that I need to try and wrestle, is learning how to do clay. And I keep talking about it, but I haven't put too much practice into it yet, but I will.
I mean, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to do. I love. There's a friend of mine here. Her father is a retired shop teacher. He taught woodworking, and now he does shows. And the daughter does pottery, and she does this thing with horsehair, where she puts it on, and you get the lines and stuff in the finish.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's. I love seeing that stuff, and I got to tell you truthfully, I don't think I could ever do it. Not the way they do it.
And then there's leather work is another very difficult thing to master. But leather work is so forgiving. Anybody can really jump right into it. You're not going to lose a finger, and it's not that messy like clay.
So, going along with this, what's your favorite medium to work with? Do you like metal more than wood?
I tend to like metal a little bit because for me it's more forgiving. You could make more mistakes. You could hide mistakes more easily in metal. You could always grind and weld things back together if you cut things shorter or longer, cut them and reattach them. But with woodwork, it's obviously a little bit more accessible. It's a little bit more lighter. So metalwork is a little bit more rewarding in the long term. But I just made this beautiful wooden cabinet, which will be in my weekend's video. That was a lot of fun.
Well,
You know, it's
that's nice.
it's I really just want to be able to just make whatever I think of, regardless of how it's made. That's really always been my goal.
Well, and that sort of I feel like takes us back about 3 steps. because you started off. I know you started off in school. You went to art school, did some teaching in art school, right? What did you teach in art school?
I taught art school, the School of Visual Arts for about 23, 24 years. And I taught what I learned in my final year, which was basically three-dimensional design. Anything, which now we call the maker,
Right.
anything, bookbinding, plastic, resins, woodwork, a little bit of everything, sculpting, mold making, package design. It was really just a smattering example of each one of those things. So I teach it to them, and then they go home and try it, and then we discuss what they learned. So I teach them something new, they go home and try it, and then we discuss what they've learned.
So what were the? I was envisioning this as a college, like as a senior level class. Was that sort of what it was, or?
It is. I'm sorry, I'm just texting on my watch because I can't text on the phone. Um, it was second year art students, second year graphic design students that I had,
Okay.
and I had about 25 students a semester for about
Okay.
23, 24 years. I taught from, somebody who wants to do the math, I taught from 93 to 2018. So
All right.
that's
I see. I graduated high school in '91, so going back to the old school days. Actually, I just started my 24th year teaching this year.
what, no kidding. What are you teaching?
I teach high school, so I teach kids to make eyeglasses. I have doctors volunteer, and
No
then we do the
kidding.
eye exams, and my kids learn to make the
Are you in a
glasses.
vocational school?
No, regular high school.
That's crazy.
It- I don't want to get into it. For me, just the quick story is I learned this in the Navy. I was in the right place at the right time, and I was able to create a program that I get to do. And I'll tell you all about it when we're up at Maker Camp. I'll sit
Sure.
down. I'll give you the rundown. So you went. I want to come back to this. So now you started off, not started after that. During that, you went and made toys, right? And
Well,
designed the toys.
my final year at School of Visual Arts, I took a class called Toys and Games with a guy named Mark Ducati, who became one of the pivotal mentors in my life. Mark saw my ability. Prior to me meeting Mark, my whole goal, career trajectory was going to be making props for TV and movies, and props for television, and really more also for editorial photography. And that was where I was headed. And when I met Mark, Mark said, "You're really primed to do toy design. You're fun. You have a fun approach to your thinking. You're a good inventor. You're a good fabricator. You could make toys." And Mark started to introduce me to people in the toy business, and that's how I got into the toy business, from taking that one class in my senior year. And Mark became a close friend. We kind of lost touch, but I'm sure if I reached out to him, we'd
Yeah.
get right back into it. But he started a family and everything, and moved to the suburbs. But we were in the city together for a long time, and but Mark was always a big factor in changing my career in that way, which I was very, very happy for. I never even considered a career in the toy business ever. I never even thought it was a thing. But I started right away in 1990, and I was in the toy business pretty much full time until 2008, 2010.
And you started your YouTube, I think, in like what it
2000,
was in 2004.
I started my YouTube in 2011 is when I
Okay.
got real serious about the TV, doing YouTube. So my
So,
channel might have started like in 2007, but I didn't really get serious about it
all
till.
right. So you started the channel, and that sort of let's go off to another thing. I've heard you talk about how you like to have a couple different cameras. Do you find yourself now sort of looking at something and going, I want to film this? A good thing, like you're welding together the plate that you made for the grill,
Hmm.
right? You cut it out. Do you think to yourself, I'm gonna visualize this. I want to video it from this angle and do
Hmm.
that.
I absolutely, when the cameras are in play, I absolutely consider how the camera's going to see whatever I do. And when there's no cameras, I jump right in and I don't consider about it at all. So I will make sure I got to watch where my elbow is. I got to make sure my shoulder is not blocking the camera. So when I do weld, sometimes I'm welding what might not seem like, but to me is an awkward
Yeah,
position,
right.
because I want to make sure that if I'm going to do a time lapse, I try and stay out of the camera as much as I possibly can and show the work. I always say my philosophy on shooting a movie is, what would your eyes see? Or what if you were right next to me, what would you be looking at? Not necessarily my own personal point of view, but if you were right next to me and I was teaching you how to do this one-on-one, what would you see? And that's really what my camera eye view is tried to be most of the
So
time.
so going with that, Suman, Woodcraft by Suman, his YouTube videos are, I mean, they are plotted out to the second. I feel
Hmm.
like, I mean, I don't know everything, but I know he very much he storyboards and says, I'm going to be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
If you have a, do you do that for the longer ones?
No, I never do that ever. I couldn't possibly do that. It's just not in my skill set. I can't possibly know exactly how I'm going to solve every problem until I'm about to solve it. I do have an overarching idea of what I want to do, and I have a goal. Sometimes I have a sketch, but I'm also always looking for the left turn. I want to go down the road and
Less travel.
I want to be primed for that moment where I have a breakthrough, even in the middle of the work, and then go,
See,
now I want to take it that way. That's better than my original idea. If I'm so rigid and I storyboard everything, I don't, for me, the
yeah.
artistry is kind of,
Well,
it is locked and might not be as fun.
his
I don't want to say
are
it's gone, but it's,
no, but his are very scientific. Like he's
yeah.
doing these YouTube studies, and I think it's cool. And it's neat that you said it
I,
because
I envy people that could do that.
I can't.
I couldn't do
No.
it. So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
put it down in any way. I just couldn't do it.
Well, but it's interesting you say that because a lot of times when I'm making a little jig or something, I don't videotape it because I'm so stuck. I don't know how I'm going to solve it, and I feel like people watching me work through it would be boring. So it's interesting hearing you say that, and I appreciate that
In
sort of.
20, in 2024, I made a conscious decision to switch up my Patreon to just behind the scenes stuff and some exclusive videos that I know would perform very well on regular YouTube because everything's changing. And I basically turned it inside out. So now all my videos have a voiceover component for the most part. Whereas for the previous 12 years, I never did a voiceover in public. Occasionally I did when I'd put the edit together and there are still things I want to explain that I didn't want to go silent. So I
Right.
do the voiceover. But all my edits will still work if the sound is shut off.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, these days, I do like to do a little explanation. So that gives me the ability to show a little bit of a confusing visual without an audible component. You might not know what I was doing,
Right.
where I could say, this is the component that I started with. And I did, and I might act it out with my hands while I'm doing it because I'm not going to do the voiceover in real time.
Right. Right.
That being said,
You can't.
sometimes I do I call it in the moment. So I'll do an in the moment where I'll just stop in the middle of what I'm doing, hold it up to the camera and say X, Y, Z, and then I go back to the
Yeah.
build, and then that cuts back into a voiceover in the final production.
I mean, you're good at that. Like you're good at explaining those things. And again, that comes down to the fact that you taught that thing for 24 years. Like,
Yeah, that help. It was a big help. Big help.
yeah. So, so, and that brings me to a different part of it, which leads me into your workshop. So one of my problems is, this is my workbench behind me, and it's hard to get that video view straight on,
Yeah.
which in your larger shop, you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's nice to have a table that's away from the wall, a table that's freestanding in an
I
island,
really
so you can get
try.
something that. Yeah, and even if you have a table like you're facing me now, if there's a table in front of you,
Right.
I tend to not. I'm just looking. I thought it was a cop coming over here. It's not a cop.
I told
I'm
you
in the
that. I
middle.
told
I'm
you
in the
that.
middle of a parking lot in Danbury, Connecticut, but there are a lot of people here, so I'm not standing out. There, it is nice to have an in the round. You'll notice in my old videos, I always worked on the central table right in the middle of the New York City shop because that's all I had. Now I have all different tables, and I have different parts on different components on different tables and different surfaces. A lot of times I work right on the table saw. I still do that, which is not a good practice. I got for years, I got people yelling at me for hammering on top of my table saw.
Oh, I never do that. I can't go that far.
Yeah. So I do a lot of whatever suits the video. So
So,
I'll work in the middle of nowhere. I'll just set up a set of horses,
well,
that
but
type of
this
thing.
this again comes back to this other idea that, like, one of the things I wanted to talk about. The reason I started this sort of IG live is because I went from having a car and a half garage to taking over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I did a video, a live, and I talked about it. I said, how much fun would it be to talk to other people and talk about how they thought through their shop changes?
Yeah.
So I know that, you built out your barn, you expanded it, you did all that work. The barn was on your property when you bought it?
The barn, well, I bought the property 20 years ago. Actually, September 24th is my 20th anniversary from the day I closed on the house in 2004. And it didn't have a barn.
Okay.
I started building the barn in 2017. And it's funny, when I wrote Kyle Stumpenhorst, I wrote him a check for $20,000 to get the building started. And that was all the money I had. I wrote the check, I had $100 left in the bank account when I handed him that check. And then when I had to write him the balance of another $25,000 or $30,000, it was all I had in the bank.
Oh my God.
that was several months later. I had more money in the bank. Yeah, I was never good with saving money. I'm really good at spending it.
Spending it's the easy thing, especially whenever there are tools you want and buildings you want to build.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, when I built that building, I really just said, you know what? You can't take it with you. Let me just see where this goes. And like a lot of the decisions I made, I just jumped right in and said, throw caution to the wind. Let's just see what happens.
And that's another thing, I want to come to that, but I first let me stick to one thread, damn it.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you,
so
Katrina.
so when you were coming up with the shop layout, right? What was one of those things that you were like, okay, I need to have this? What were your
I
thoughts?
really, when it comes to the shop layout, I'm horrible. People in my life will tell you, I'm very scrappy. I'm not really good. If there's a machine and a plug, I just start working.
Okay.
I'm not really like the workflow develops if I have something to do multiples of. But in general, when it comes to me shooting a video, I'm just scrapping from one thing to the next. Some spot in the shop becomes the central spot for that object, whatever it is. Most of the time these days, if I have an object I'm building, it tends to be on the welding table because it's the flattest, broadest table that I keep as clean as possible. But in general, I knew when I built that first building, I wanted it to just be one big open room
Okay.
with the flexibility of moving things around in case I got a TV show, which I did when I did the Netflix show.
Yeah.
And we ended up emptying the place out for the TV network, for the TV production company to come in there. And we put some stuff back in it. We made some room for the camera guys. We made some room for the producers to hide behind a fake wall. So I like the idea of keeping a shop flexible for the many different opportunities for me to make edutainment
Right.
videos.
Well, you've got 16 plus bandsaws, don't you?
Yep, a lot of them just stand around waiting to be used. They're just sitting there going, "Put me in, coach."
I was going
But
to
I
say,
just,
where do you keep them all?
I have them lined up here and there.
Okay.
I got a lot of spaces that are being underutilized. They're really more storage
Well,
units.
oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say you kind of need to. What's the square footage of the shop?
The square footage in my backyard is 40 by 70. So I don't know what the math on that is. It's like 2,500 plus.
Okay. That's a
And
good size.
then I have the shop down the block, which I rent from my landlord, is 5,000 square feet, and that's become more of a storage unit. But it is operational. But I spend most of my time in the backyard now. And then I just built a horse barn, which is 36 by 48, whatever that math is. So
Damn.
that's I don't know, 2,000 square feet, maybe
You
less.
got, yeah, you got a lot of space.
And then I have the racetrack, which has got some space in it, probably a couple, like maybe less than 2,000 square feet, but it's 2 acres, so I got a lot of property to mess around on.
Yeah.
And then I
Well,
got 40 acres in the backyard. Oh, and then I have my project house down the block. That house is small, but the barn is rather large. But I'm not really using the barn right now. It's just sitting there. It's holding a lot of the components for the house. So in this vintage barn, probably built in the 1800s, I have sinks and stoves and washing machines, all the components that are going to go back inside the house.
it's kind of funny that you go from, like, oh, I didn't have this place, so I had this built, and now you've got one, two, three, four. all
It's
these
almost
different.
like I feel like in a way, I feel like somebody that immigrated to this country and is overcompensating. I immigrated to East Durham and I'm overcompensating. I have to spend all my money on every piece of property, and my grandkids will be rich. I'll live the life of a pauper.
Oh, you know what? Like you said, you can't take it with you.
Yeah, live it hand to mouth. No, I'm
Tom
enjoy. I
Val.
mean, I'm enjoying my life. It gets stressful, but I've lived the stressful life of a freelancer from the beginning, so I know what it feels like to potentially not know where your money's coming from. So you immediately cut back and immediately say, you know what, I'm going to
Well, I mean, I think no. I think when you grow up and you have to work to get your own stuff, you tend to hold on and get whatever you can. So, speaking of that, right? That brings me into another thing I want to talk about. You've got all this space. One of my friends reached out to me. He goes, "You know what? I'm curious about with him was
take.
how does he get so many great brand deals?" And the fact is that I'm just looking to see something real quick. Oh, there you go. The fact is you are Jimmy DiResta and you've had a couple TV shows now. Do
All
you
right.
basically just walk into some place, you see a new tool and you're like, hey, you know what? I want that. And you talk to the company, or how do you do brand deals?
Most of the time, I always say this is my theory on brand deals. It's like going to the dance and wanting to dance with the hot girl, and you go up to her and you go, "Oh, let's dance," and she says, "I'm not interested in you." That's how I think brands are. Brands are the hot girl, and you want to dance with the girl at the dance, and you go, "Will you dance with me?" And they're like, "Why would I want to dance with you?" They have to make the first move. Brands have to make the first move. So you have to make yourself look cool and attractive and wear a leather jacket and smoke cigarettes and hang out with the cool guys so that the brands start to pay attention to you. When the brands come to you, you have the upper hand. When you go to the brands and say, I want to work with you, you can't say, give me $5,000 a
Right.
month. Because they'll be like,
Right.
what? You knocked on my door to give you money? What's wrong with you? They have to knock on your door and say, "Can we gladly give you 5,000 a month?" And you go, "You know what? I want 10,000 a month." So that's really that's my philosophy on brand deals. And people will say, "Oh, whatever happened with this one or whatever? Oh, why don't you work with?" I go, "Because they never reached out to me. I there are certain brands like I'm about to buy a Kubota tractor, and they never showed any interest in me. I'm buying it because I need it.
Right.
Once I own it, I'll reach out to them and say, hey, is there any opportunity for a brand deal here? I already own your equipment. If they
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
no, I'll just cover the logo and put my logo over it, and that'll be that. And
Uh,
the fans will know that I don't have a deal because I'm not exploiting their logo, and I'll just move forward. Everybody knows if I'm not exploiting a brand, they're not paying me. In a video, when I use DeWalt, Milwaukee, Ryobi, everybody knows none of them are paying me because
yeah.
they're all just laying all over the table. No one's got an exclusivity.
That does make sense. I
Yeah.
mean, I think as a lot of the people on here are both creators and content creators, so they're makers and content creators. We're all looking for that one thing where potentially it could help out. And I like to hear you say that because I've got a nice leather jacket. I've been thinking about wearing it more. It's a biker jacket. I haven't put it on for years. There might be a spare pack of smokes in there. Maybe I'll pull those. No. I think uh, I have brands that I enjoy working with and companies that I've talked to.
Trying to
I
look cool.
definitely, yeah, I love Onefinity. Well, the Onefinity guys are great. Like they're
Well,
outstanding.
that being said, there are brands that I do reach out to because I simply just want a free package or nothing at all. I'll just
Hmm.
say, but when it's a big fish and you want to hook a big fish, you can't go knock on
No,
their door.
right,
Like a big fish, like, a tool company. Like I don't technically have a tool branding deal with a hand tool company. I don't have a deal with Craftsman. I don't have a deal with DeWalt. I never had a deal with Milwaukee. I don't have any brand deals with any of those guys. And that's fine. And I've also never really reached out to them.
yeah,
That's a lie. I had a little thing going on with DeWalt, but that was through a branding company,
okay,
not through DeWalt headquarters. I got a brand company, and the way I get those bigger deals almost often is because I have a fan that works at a marketing agency
yeah, that makes
that
sense.
brings my name up, and
Yeah,
then it takes them a week to sell me to everybody internally, and then I get a phone call from them, and they go, "Hey, I'm a huge fan. I've just been put in charge of this brand, and I want to try and get you involved. It took me a week to get everybody on board. They just did all their research on you, and everybody likes the idea. Let's go do something." So that's, like I said, I just wait to get the phone calls or the
I
emails,
mean,
and
that's
and the way I do that is I just try and draw attention to myself by making good content.
which again, you do make good content.
Thank you. I try.
I mean, you've been doing it for a while. You've got even when you do ones that look like they take, I'm just throwing something
Hmm?
together. Even the thrown together, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've done lots of videos that I throw together because of obligations,
Well,
time,
but
and brands and whatnot.
and by saying thrown together, I don't mean it's just like, this is a last minute. It's
Hmm?
like you said, I just, that you got to keep your elbow out of the way when you're doing something, and you just show your thoughts throughout it, and it really comes through in how you set up the videos and
Oh,
everything else.
thank you.
So when you did, now you said when you did Making Fun, you had to clean out the shop and everything else.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody here has that question of how is it different working on a TV show versus you just wanting to make something?
Well, I didn't have to worry too much about the camera. I didn't have to worry nearly at all about the camera work because the producers, a couple of producers, are really building the storyline based on where we're going. We know for this episode we're going to build the dinosaur, for instance, and I said the producer will come to me and go, what's the next 2 hours look like? I'll say, well, we're going to build the frame, we got to build the 2x4, we got to get the plywood, we got to go get the foam, and then I kind of headed up a team typically, and Paul would head up another team. It's
Right.
typically kind of how the episodes would work out. And Paul and whoever was on his team were working on something, and me and my team, and that was partly to make sure the builds kind of got done a little bit quicker, but also gives the producers to break up the storyline and see. Me and Derek would often be goofing off, or me and Graz would be goofing off, and and they're always looking for the funny in that. And so they say, by 3 o'clock, what do you think we can get done? I can say we can get the dinosaur built. I can start laying out the conveyor belt parts and whatever. I'm just using that episode as an
Yeah, yeah.
example. But that's really where it was at. Is like I only had to just focus on building. I didn't care. I didn't have to worry too much about the cinematography nearly at all. Occasionally, I would suggest to the cameraman. Cameramen on these TV shoots are really usually such creative, fun, interested guys, and so from time to time they would really lean on our opinions because they knew we shot stuff. Especially Paul. Paul always did lots of trick photography, so they were always picking Paul's brain and stealing his ideas. And they would ask me, "What's the best angle here?" And I'd be like, "Well, I'm going to be under here. You might want to get underneath there." And then they look and they go, "You know what? Let's get the specialty camera. Jimmy was right. Let's go get a GoPro, or let's go get a camera on a jib or whatever it is." But for the most part, those guys are extremely creative, and they came up with really good, fun stuff. So I didn't have to.
I'm
I would
surprised.
just make a suggestion in passing. I wouldn't have to fight for it.
I know Pat has a background in the
Yeah,
visual.
Pat's
Uh,
Pat's got a full TV production degree.
yeah, so I was, when you said Paul, I would have expected Pat would be the one going, no, no, you guys, you need to go over there. Or he
Oh,
was
Pat,
too.
Pat, Pat. I don't want to throw Pat under the bus at all, but Pat was a little not very vocal because he was just a little nervous about his English at the time.
Yeah,
He's over that
yeah,
now, but in the beginning, it was a little intimidating for all of us. That this produce, you don't want to upset anybody, da, 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 da. And Pat was always a little anxious about his ability to not speak perfect English. But we all told him and made sure he understands that that's an asset, and now he knows.
Did you know him beforehand?
Yeah, yeah, we all knew each other. We all knew each other before. We all
Well,
met in one way or another through this Facebook group that started called I Like to Make Stuff. It started in and around 2012, 2013.
okay. Only because if he was, if he was nervous about his English, then I would have thought, like they just brought him in just from saying that.
Yeah,
Um,
no. He Pat and Paul became very close friends, and they kind of were a team, and me
yeah,
and Derek were a team, and Graz was always in the background of all of us. He was actually Graz was very friendly with Paul, and then Graz was friendly with me, and then I introduced him to Derek, and then they became
yeah.
friendly because they live in the same area. So it's really tangled web of just positive happenstances the way we all got together.
So, when you're filming the show, like, how much did you get done in it? And Okay. Each
We had
episode.
about a week for the
Okay.
build,
Okay.
itself, but then the build would get to about 90%, anywhere between 85 to 90%, and the producers would be like, "That's enough. We could finish Act 3 or Act 2, and then the reveal would be the final act, whether it be 3 or 4. All right, that's enough." And then we'd either shut down the build, and then it would go to the prop people that would finish
Oh,
it
okay.
and beautify it, and we would
Yeah.
help with that, but it just
Yeah.
wouldn't be filmed.
Yeah.
And then we might start filming some of the silly interstitials. So basically about a week per build, and then also depending upon the rain and the weather when we
Right.
were going to do outside shoots, the finale we'd always schedule. Everybody was constantly checking the weather. It
Yeah,
was a
because there was
rainy.
one.
It was a rainy season when we did that.
Right. I remember there was one episode. I remember watching, and there was something bad with. I mean, listen, it was no worse than the rain at Maker Camp last year. But I remember.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Oof,
Yeah, so
that was,
the episodes were about, like, I would say, all in, fully locked and, fully everything in the can, probably about a week and a half,
okay.
because we'd have to shoot, like I said, the interstitials, the silliness, and sometimes we'd have to do, once they looked at the edits, like we have to do a couple of little pieces. There'd be like certain days where we just make up stuff that had to fit in other episodes, so we'd have to make sure we put on the right episode, whatever episodic clothing when we needed.
So I mean that's in terms of whenever you're building the cabinet that you're built, you just finished up. That's a lot different though than working on that versus working on a TV show.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's nobody to bother me. We don't have to take scheduled breaks. I could work as long as I want. I don't.
Scheduled breaks.
I don't have to wait for the camera crew to come back. There was moments in time where I knew that this thing that we were working on, I might not have figured it out completely. We might have started it on camera, and it might not have been technically figured
Yeah.
out. But on camera, as long as we got the start, but the finish is really what they're looking
Yeah.
for. A little bit of build time in between. So everybody would leave, and I'd spend some time working on something, and then in the morning it might be like almost done, and then Mike would be like, "What the fuck did you do? We need to get it on film." And I'd be like, "I got it on the GoPro if you want," and they would always get mad at me.
Yeah. But then they go back and animate your drawing, so
Yeah.
and then you do the voiceover.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other interesting thing though, thinking about, you're talking about how you have the Walton, Ryobi, Milwaukee, everything on your bench. During the filming of this, you probably couldn't do that.
No, the producers got in touch with Milwaukee, so they provided all the tools. So
Okay.
even though it was my shop and my property, I didn't own the show, technically
Right.
speaking. So they just basically said to me, they're like, "What kind of tools would you want on set? We'll reach out to anybody." And I said, frankly, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I have no loyalty to anybody. And so Milwaukee sent over a bunch of tools. And then after the show was over and it looked like we might have a hit, I reached out. Well, they reached back to me, one of the people at Milwaukee, and said, "Let's have a meeting." And then in that meeting, she made it clear to me that Milwaukee doesn't pay influencers. And so I blocked them on Instagram and told her the conversation was over. Because I didn't want them using my likeness to show off stuff on the show if the show became a hit.
Right.
So Milwaukee is still blocked on my Instagram.
Well, I mean, that's got to be hard for you too, because you can inadvertently promote a product just by having.
I do it every day.
Right.
But it's not gonna I'm not Casey Neistat. It's not gonna really move the needle for them. But the other, like I said, for instance, the show was poised to look like it was going to be a huge hit. It's kind of a cult classic now. It's not really a hit. But if it was a huge hit and Milwaukee started posting pictures of me and tagging me holding their tools, that would have been annoying because they don't pay influencers. They only give away free tools. And for me, it's an ethical thing.
Right.
If their standard rule across the board is what they told me, and then I just spoke to another influencer and they heard the same thing. We do not pay influencers. We only give away free equipment. That's fine. This is our business. As much as it's fun and it's entertaining, if it's all I do, I still need to get paid. And if I'm going to advertise your products, I got to get paid.
Right.
If I'm not going to get paid, I'm not going to advertise your products explicitly. They might be there inherently, but I'm not going to explicitly say, this is the best screw gun on the market because I'm getting paid for it, because I'm not.
Right.
And so, like I said, I blocked them not to be mean. They could care less.
Right.
I just don't want to be tagged in something as if I'm being paid by them.
Right. And
You know,
that
because
makes sense.
that invites criticism. That invites, oh, what a yeah, you know, you're a Milwaukee tool boy. I'm like, I'm not. I wish I was. I would happily promote them if I was a Milwaukee tool boy, but I'm not. Well, you know, I got a lot of that in the beginning of like, you're a DeWalt tool lackey. I'm like, I wish I was. I just happen to have a lot of DeWalt because that's what I started buying with my dad when I
Yeah.
was a kid.
No, I will take, I mean, I like to use any tool. I mean, I have a rigid,
George, what's up, George? I'm saying hi to
yeah,
George.
I have a rigid trim router that I love, and I've got, you know, the DeWalt drill and,
Hmm.
you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever works best. I
I
think,
honestly say I had never worked with a tool that I put down and said this is pure garbage,
I, I
except for maybe Skill or Black and Decker tools in the beginning, and they're like one of the best heritage tool brands.
yeah,
But they're, lately,
yeah,
this stuff is pure garbage.
no,
But in general, when it comes to Milwaukee, DeWalt, even the new Craftsman battery line, Makita, Ryobi, honestly, they're all the same.
yeah,
I say just pick whichever color you like the best.
there's not
Whichever
a
one you
huge,
have the most batteries of is the one you should buy.
there's not a huge difference.
Yeah.
Funny story. I had a Black and Decker sander when I started working. I started making stuff, and it burned out. And I took it. You know, I had some problem. I took it to a DeWalt place to get it fixed because there used to be a DeWalt repair stuff. And the guy looks at me and looks at this DeWalt. He goes, "And you're using it to make furniture?" He goes, "Dude, this is not. You can't use
Yeah.
Black and Decker for that."
Yeah. It's homeowner junk. It's for like sanding a bump on the floor, you know.
Right. It is what it is. So there's a lot of different stuff. So, you know, and one of the other things I think is sort of important to come into this conversation of influencers, creators, and companies. I think the problem is that some of these companies can get away with, in this case, Milwaukee, with sending out tools and only sending tools because people are happy to get tools and they're like, all right, I'll use them. And if you send out 100 tools to 100 people, you know, you've got enough eyes on them.
Yeah, that's cheaper than a lot of commercials used to be. So that's why I mean
Yeah.
I don't fault them for giving away stuff. I just need to get paid in my world. A lot of people take the deal and that's fine. And
I do.
honestly, that being said, I know I gotta believe there are influences much bigger than me that are getting paid by someone like Milwaukee. Because they'll be like, you know what? The only way you're gonna be the tools in my hands is if you pay me. I'm not at that level, and it's fine. There's plenty of other stuff to make money with.
I mean, if all you're using is that one brand, yes, I don't see
Yeah,
how they're not.
yeah.
So, you know, my sister just came on and I had to tell her that you said, or tell you that she said hi again. So she works in a high school. Um, uh, God, I always forget the name of these where the kids go and spend the night. They sleep there and um, whatever they're called. The name literally just went out of my head.
Oh, you mean like a
And
private school or like
yeah,
a boarding school?
yes, a boarding school. Dear
Right.
God, I don't know why that's always so hard for me to remember. And she works actually, and you'll like this. She works in the theater department,
Oh,
and
that's
they
cool.
make props. Yeah, and she makes all sorts of props, and she does all that stuff. She just corrected me. Boarding school. Everybody, yes, boarding school. I get it. Jimmy
Yeah.
corrected me too. I'm an idiot.
Right.
Um, so, you know, you I know started out making letters in a sign shop,
Hmm.
right? So if you had to tell somebody starting out a skill that you think could help them expand across and grow over time, what would be one thing that you would tell somebody to start working on?
Learning a 3D modeling program,
Yeah.
learning a CAD system, because that's the future of making things. Of course, using a CAD system, but also learn practical shop techniques from how to file to how to cut metal with a hacksaw to how to use a hand plane. All those come into play. And the only way you're going to really mix all those hand skills in together is just to challenge yourself to build a chest of drawers or make a stool. You just got to pick a project. And if you go from one project to another, to another, to another, you start developing all these hand skills. But at the same time, 3D modeling, which I'm not good at, I
No.
fumble my way through it all the time. In fact, I haven't used Fusion in so long. The other night I went to download it. It says your computer is outdated. You need a more important, you need a newer computer to download Fusion. So I believe that if you're a young person starting out, challenge yourself to physical projects, but also learn 3D modeling programs.
I want to try the Shaper 3D. I haven't tried that yet.
Hmm.
I was at festival with Tyler Shaheen, the Southern Craftsman, and we
Hmm.
had an idea, and he pulled out his iPad and modeled the 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 coffee table legs that we wanted to make, and modeled them, and from there he was able to come up with a template that we could
Yeah.
cut out on the Shaper Origin, which we
Yeah.
then used to, it's like
Yeah. That's
I,
where it's going. As much as people want to stop the tide of advanced skill sets, it's where it's going.
you can't. I mean, that's a huge thing. Someone just said, can we get a 3D model class at Maker Camp?
It's not a
Um,
bad idea. I mean, Bob taught a good one at Workbench Con a few years ago.
oh yeah, so, Sean just said Bob has his fusion
Yep.
class. Um, I do need to get into one of those. I tried to use SketchUp, and I just
Hmm.
couldn't. I could not
SketchUp, I
do that.
think, is really confusing. I know my buddy Ryan can draw anything in SketchUp in minutes. You just start describing an idea to him, all of a sudden it's there. But it just depends on what language you begin to learn and how good you devote yourself to it.
Chad, Alabama, Papa Chad said SolidWorks. He Gears and Fire, and Chad said SolidWorks.
Yeah,
I've never heard of it.
SolidWorks is really sort of an industry standard when it comes to the higher end design programs or the design companies. SolidWorks
I
is a
I'm gonna have to check it out, because that's really something I know I'm lacking on, and it's something I really really want to get into that. Um,
Brian. What's up, Brian?
uh, so I was thinking more about
Oh,
you're
Gears
starting
and
off.
Fire. He says I could teach anybody SolidWorks.
I need to learn it. Like maybe at Maker Camp I'll hook up. I mean, are you doing any 3D printing? Have you gotten into that at all?
A little bit, but I just go to Thingiverse and find something to play with. The 3D DIY Dave has all of our
Yeah.
3D files as far as our human figures, and that's fun to play with. But I don't. It's not built into my workflow like it is for Bob, for instance. It's just not built into my workflow. It's fun and it's novel, and there'll be that day where I'll be like, I know what to do. But it just hasn't really. I haven't had that huge spark of inspiration yet.
You know, and that brings me to that's another really. I I have found myself in the past to be like, here's the thing, and this 3D printing really feeds into this. I look at it and I see some of the things people are coming up with. They're like, oh, I'm going to make this, and I make this, and I don't see the world the way that they're seeing it.
Hmm.
And I think and
Me
so
neither.
having taught this type of thing, not 3D printing, but imaging and everything else, how would you talk to somebody? How would you encourage someone to build that 3D thinking mind?
I, it's really just a matter of getting to learn that language of 3D modeling. If you're good at 3D modeling, you could output it as a solid CNC, like Nate Birchhold does. He could
Yeah.
CNC anything,
Oh my
but it's
God,
because
it's incredible.
he just has such a strong modeling background.
Yeah.
So if you have a good modeling background, you could 3D print, you could CNC. It really depends on where you want to go with it. So I think that's really the head of the octopus, is being able to be a really good modeler
Yeah.
and 3D printing, and it's just a matter of how you want to express what you designed.
I like that. I really do. I need to. I guess I'll have to look into SolidWorks, because I really need to be better about doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so taking a step back, because this to me is the coolest thing. You were in high school, the bandsaw thing.
Hmm.
I'm just curious how you started working at a sign shop cutting out letters.
Well, I started working on the bandsaw at my home. My dad was a New
Okay.
York City fireman, and when I was a little kid, one of his contemporaries passed away, and his wife sold this whole workshop to my father. And that's how us tool collectors get the best stuff, is when somebody passes away. Unfortunately, someone's going to get an incredible collection when I drop dead, and I'll just pass it on. But when I was a little kid, my dad, one day the workshop had a bandsaw, a this, a that, a lathe. We had like 7 really good tools in my shop because this person he worked with passed away. And the bandsaw showed up, and me and my brother started playing on the bandsaw. And that I must have been about 6 or 7 years old around that time. And I wasn't allowed to use the bandsaw when I was so young. So my brother and my cousin developed this technique where somebody would stand behind it and turn the pulley, just turn the pulley up, pull on the belt slowly, and you could slowly pass a piece of wood through the blade. And then as I got older, we really started on the scroll saw, which we called the jigsaw back then. But so right now there's so many good high-tech scroll saws.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But at the time, the scroll saws were the kind that the wood would go, it would shake all over the place, like an old home light or an old Craftsman. But we were using those unsupervised. But then when it came to the bandsaw, we all had to wait till we got a little bit older, and then my dad started letting us use the bandsaw. So by the time I was a senior in high school, I don't know how many. I must have had a couple of thousand flight hours on the bandsaw.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so I worked for a private woman making party favors throughout high school. And then she sold the business. And from then I walked into the sign shop and said, I'm good on the bandsaw. Can you use me? And they said, let me see how good you are. Like, the guy was skeptical. He said, let me see how good you are on the bandsaw. So he gave me some paper patterns glued to plastic. I passed the test, right? Since you're in high school, you could work on Sundays and work on Saturdays. We put in a few hours every Saturday. So I worked half days on Saturdays for the first couple of months. And then when I graduated high school, I started working full time. And then shortly thereafter, I applied to art school. I didn't go to art school right away. I took maybe 6, 8 months off, or I went to the next following year. I was a full-time student.
You were, I think, at one point, weren't you talking about engineering school or something?
I was in high school. I was groomed to go to architecture school. So for 3 years, I spent half of my day at an architectural vocational school or in a class. It was a school that had everything from automotives to dental to architectural design. Exactly. In Long Island, we had BOCES. So I went to BOCES, and the class I was working with was architectural design and engineering. And everybody that went through that program was being groomed to go to architecture school. But by the time I got to my senior year, I was a little confused because I really wasn't feeling being an architect. Most of the architects I met, I just didn't feel like I fit in with them. They were too uptight. They weren't really artists in the way that I felt like I was. I was much more of a free thinker, but I didn't really know. And looking back, I could identify it. But in the time, I just didn't fit in with them. And I realized why architects are uptight assholes for the most part. I hope there's none listening.
No.
It's a joke. But
follow me.
No, but as I got to be more of a fabricator in my adult life, I started to realize why I didn't like architects when I was a kid. Is that they're just they're like calculators. It's like hanging out with a calculator.
Well, so you probably did a lot of drawings and stuff.
Joke. We aren't all uptight. I know. I say that tongue in cheek. I live with an architect. The kid Ryan that lives in my house is an architect, and I love that kid.
So, but that probably helped you have a better visualization and ability to visualize all the stuff too.
No, having that background helps because then I could, I always had the mind of being able to construct things in my imagination. And I had some really good architecture teachers that really inspired me. And one of my architect teachers, believe it or not, brought us to the city to see the opening of Trump Tower when it opened. So we all hopped on a bus and drove 40 miles from Long Island to go into the city to wander around the lobby of Trump Tower in 1983 or 84, whenever Trump Tower opened. It might have been open for a year or two when we went over there. And that was such a big deal for a teacher to bring a group full of students. And he was an architect teacher. I know I'm just kidding around being sarcastic about architects, but I mean, I look back and I was like, what an experience for him to expose a bunch of curious minds, walking around the lobby of Trump Tower and just seeing now it looks like a sports car from the 80s. It looks dated, but at the time it was a revolutionary building. But also being in a bus and him pointing out all these famous buildings as we're driving down. There's the Chrysler Building, built in the 1930s, and he
Yeah.
basically gave us a guided tour of Manhattan, which was really cool.
Well, and those buildings are
Hi, Godmother.
freaking the buildings are just amazing to look at with
Yeah,
their architecture. I mean, that's you can't get a better place than that to look at.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
My wife and I went down last year, and we that's it. We just spent time walking around. So again, I like to make sure I try to honor the time here because you
Steve.
still have another hour to drive. If you could, um, if you could give the people listening one big piece of advice that you would say, this is one thing I would suggest, right?
Hmm.
I know that's a tough one because there's so many things, and we've already talked a lot
I
about
guess
a
one
lot of
thing
stuff.
I would say is, and it's more of an OCD for me, is finish what you start. I see so many people start projects and just abandon them, and they make excuses for years. Finish what you start. Even if you know the ending's not going to be good, just finish it anyway so you get into the practice of starting something and finishing it. So many young people are so quick to be like, fuck it. I'm on to something else. And then you become a flake. You become somebody that doesn't finish stuff.
Yeah.
And when you work at a job, you can't have the ability to see things through all the way to the end because in your private life, you don't finish anything.
Well, one of the things I tell my students often is the hardest thing is that you'll you'll say, okay, this time I'm going to do this. Like I'm not going to. So for me, I was talking to one of my students today who wants to graduate early, and I said the problem with graduating early is that
Thank you, 10,000. Yeah.
you're going to work for a year, you're going to make money, and you're going to get comfortable, and you're going to go, you know what? I'm making money. I don't
Yeah.
need to go and do that. And then you get comfortable, and it becomes a habit, right? So quitting becomes a habit. Not
Yeah. Yeah.
finishing becomes a
Hey,
habit.
Steve.
And that
Yeah,
is one of the
exactly.
things I talk about.
Yeah, I think, finishing what you start is so important. Yeah, I could say more about it, but
No, but that also means I need to get to work on my I I I I started working on last year. I had to stop a slider for the table saw. I have a uh, thing that I needed to have more space, so now I need to finish it. Um, well, listen, I truly appreciate.
well,
Malcolm
thank
says
you.
he needed to hear that. Yeah,
Yes, Malcolm. What's up, buddy?
I love Malcolm. What are you looking for most at Maker Camp?
Just to connect more with people I haven't met yet. Throughout the year, I meet so many people like, oh, I was at Maker Camp. I'm like, I was at Maker Camp. I don't know. And a lot of it has to do with me having 30 guests at my house. So I keep running back home. So this year I said I'm going to spend more time the late nights at the camp versus me going home and making sure my house guests having fun. So I want to basically be at the only party that's at Maker Camp, and then basically coming home and giving everybody hot cocoa to go to bed.
Well, I mean, it's hard for you because there are so many people coming up to you saying hi. I did have one question. Says, does Jimmy plan to make a new TV series, A Maker's Ghost House?
That's my house. That my house is. I'm working on the graveyard house, and there hasn't been too many ghost. There hasn't been much ghost activity this year. Not to say that it's dead, but last year, in the middle of working on the house in the summer, my girlfriend Rachel came over to me and goes, "What is this?" And there were like wet child handprints on the ground, and it kicked off a whole storyline last year. And the child handprints are still on the
Oh my
ground, and
God.
then at a later date, I brought a bunch of guys over from one of the Maker Camp events in the summer, and we looked at the house. And somebody, I think it might have been Rob, noticed like, "Hey, now there's kid footprints over here," which I didn't see. So kid handprints and kid footprints, wet in some sort of oil, showed up in the house.
That's
Now could be the ultimate prank, but I doubt it because nobody really knows where that house is, and they're
uh,
real handprints. They're not
Chad,
fake.
Chad says they're still there.
Yeah, Chad was there. They're still there. They weren't there when I bought the house. And Chad and everybody knows I had pictures from when before I owned the house. When I was thinking about buying it, when I was with Howard, we were thinking about buying it. I went there, took 100 pictures of the house. So when these handprints showed up, I went back to see if they were in those original photographs from just a few months earlier, and they weren't in any of them. the picture, so it's a mystery.
That's freaky. I
Yeah.
So the worst ghost story I ever had was I was in a house, the oldest house in Tioga County in upstate Pennsylvania. It was my fraternity house in college. I got back before everyone else, and I was upstairs and I heard a mop bucket full of water move across the floor. And I immediately shut my door and locked it, thinking like that would keep a ghost out. I don't think I know how to deal with ghosts. High
Yeah.
fives from above, from beyond. My friend Ryan said, "Hi, friend." Um, all right. So again, I appreciate you. I want you to drive
Yeah.
safe.
This is fun.
Next week, I'm going to have Eric Curtis from In Curtis is going to be on, and we're going to talk.
Sure.
And then I get a chance to talk to him about working on TV shows as well, so we
Yeah.
can have a combination there.
Yeah. 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 Right on.
I appreciate you, and
Thank
I'm
you.
going to tell you the rest of the story about my glasses thing when we meet up.
Okay, buddy. It's great talking to you, and thank you everybody that jumped in.
Yeah, Dave.
I didn't get a chance to
Uh,
acknowledge everybody, but I see a lot of friends down there.
it's hard. It's hard because then that interrupts. Scott says hi. Dave says hi. We're going to see
Thanks,
some of
Sean.
these great guys soon.
Yep.
All right. Drive safe.
All right, brother. Thank you, everybody. So
Thank you
I don't
so
know. Do
much.
you end it? Do I end it? You
I'm
end
going to
it.
end it. I'll see you later.
Love and respect, guys.
Bye.